everybody. So we are here with Dr. I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Is
Brazzle.
Brazzle. Okay,
Yes.
got it. I wanted to make sure I didn't butcher it,
Yeah.
All right. And so it's so glad to have you here. And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. Um, Definitely an honor to be on your podcast. So just a little bit about me. I am the youngest of seven. The youngest of seven. Was born and raised in Miami, Florida. Grew up there, went to school there from kindergarten through 12th grade, then left Florida and went to college in Tampa, Florida, and was in Tampa, Florida for 15 years before I moved out to Houston, Texas, where I am currently. I've been an educator for 2 decades, believe it or not. I know people tell me I still have a baby face, but I've been an educator for 2 decades, serving as a school administrator, as well as a teacher, a mentor, you name it. And then also, currently, I'm a two-time best-selling author, as well as a professional speaker, and I love it. Entrepreneur, just trying to make it in this day and age.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And so tell me a little bit about your first book.
Yeah, so actually, my first book, which is actually called "From Class Clown to Principal,"
Oh, I love that name.
so so that talks pretty much about how I was in school as the class clown and always joking around, and because it was boring, and I hate to be bored, right? So just trying to keep that engagement lively as much as possible. And then I, talk about, my journey from then to going to school. Actually, like I said, I'm the youngest of seven. So being the first one in my family to even go to college and graduate from college, and then deciding to go into education, right? After spending so much time, giving teachers hell, here I am now in the classroom myself, and then just transitioning out of the classroom to becoming, a school principal. So pretty neat little story there.
Yeah, that is pretty neat. And tell me about what was kind of when you were writing that book. What was it that you wanted to? What was the big message that you wanted to give out?
Well, one of the things that I noticed is as an educator, I started seeing a lot of students who were, kind of like me. I'm like, I used to do all of this stuff, and just realizing, hey, here's my chance to give back to humanity, to give back to society, and just let them know that, hey, yes, this was me, but I realized that, there was probably some things that I should not have done, and so I wanted to just tell them, even though you may be a class clown now, even though you may play around, hey, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world for you. And then at the same time, I wanted to let other people know that even if you have a class clown in your classroom, that doesn't mean that they won't go on to become something better, something good. Sometimes when you have that student that's, joking around and playing around, you might have to look in the mirror and reflect, because that kid could be bored, like me. It wasn't that I was bored or just trying to act out because I didn't get the lesson. Like, I was real smart. I was bored because what you was teaching me was so easy. It didn't take me, a 45 minute or an hour to get that kind of stuff done. So when I had all of that downtime, I was going to wreak havoc.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got.
yeah,
Oh, and so that's great. And so the book is really for students and also for teachers too, and for
right,
principals and for
right,
educators that want to be able to understand better uh,
right.
how to deal with the smart students or with students that might not be reaching as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You nailed it on the head.
Yeah, wow. And that's so interesting right now because these are so relevant for these times,
Uh,
because as ki- as I think even for us as an adults, I think we're becoming, we want to get more out of each moment of the day. And so
Right.
if something gets dragged on, I think our brains start shutting off. And, uh, and so what are some of the things that you talked about in that book that, that help educators or students, go through that?
Yeah, it really goes back to the biggest thing is just reflection. Reflection, because sometimes um, it's not always the students. A lot of times we think, when teachers say, oh man, this class this or this class that, sometimes you have to look in the mirror and say, man, is it me? Maybe I'm not being engaging enough for these students. Maybe it's something that I can do better to better meet their needs. It's not just always trying to point the blame on, the students won't do this or they won't do that, or they keep talking, they keep moving in their seats. Sometimes it requires you to look in the mirror at yourself and say, what is it that I can do differently so that I can reach this student in his full potential and pull things out of him that maybe others haven't pulled out of
Hmm. And that's such an important lesson in every area of our lives, in
him. Right,
entrepreneurship, in our health, in that a lot of times we're looking for things outside of us, but then
right.
we are the ones, and especially in entrepreneurship, if you're not really meeting your clients' needs, then, what's the point? You're not going to get it,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then when you were, what led you to like write the first book?
Well, I always had it within me. I always had it, and I believe everyone actually have a book within them. It's just a matter of pulling it out. And so when I actually got my first principal job, I said, you know what? And talk about reflection. I started reflecting. I was like, wow, I've come such a long way from being the class clown, and now here I am sitting at my desk as a school principal, and something just went off and said, you have to write the book. You have to write the book. And 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 I wrote it during my first year as a school principal at an alternative school, and it just came to fruition. And I mean, I'm very proud.
That's awesome. What was the challenges? What was one of the biggest challenges that you went through whenever you were writing that first book?
Well, so great question, great question. So for me, it was like I had no idea where to begin, like how to publish, what to do with the cover, anything. Like I was just putting things on paper, just writing and writing and writing, and I'm getting all of these thoughts, and I'm like, yes, I got to include this. No, probably shouldn't include that. So I was like all over the place, um, and and then I said, you know what? Let me just do it. Let me just do whatever I think is right, and then just put it out there, and and that's exactly what I did. Now with that book, it didn't really get the, I guess I'm gonna say, the sales as well as the exposure that I would like it to receive. And so what I decided from after that one is, I said, well, let me do some research to find out, the right process, the right steps to take, because I do want to write another book. And so I researched and researched and researched and researched and researched and researched and interviewed authors and got their feedback, and just started ingratiating my mind with all of these things on how to self-publish, how to actually put things together to make it a powerful book, how to get more sales, how to advertise, and that led me to actually my second book, which became a bestseller called Outlier Leadership.
Oh, wow. So
Yes.
how many books have you written?
So three books.
Wow.
Three books. So this one made me a bestseller, one-time bestseller, Outlier Leadership. And this book was actually from all of my leadership roles, from not just as a school principal or in the school setting, but I also talked about, you know, as a basketball coach, as a leader in as a student, you know, a student leader. So this book, Outlier Leadership, is actually called Outlier Leadership, which is, and if you're familiar with math, an outlier, you know, is kind of like that point on the graph that stands out. So that's, we're talking about that leader that stands out. And is the subtitle is the 5 No Excuses Habits of Outlier Leaders. And so this book is designed to talk about the habits. And here's the thing, you know, with habits, they have to be daily. You know, I'm not talking about, you know, weekly habits or monthly or yearly. These are things that those leaders that most of us, you know, aspire to be, these are the things that they're doing on a daily. And if you ever want to get to that level, and I tell people all the time, like, you listen to podcasts, or you might listen to a TEDx, or you may, you know, do some research on your own. But if you're not actually doing what the people are telling you to do in order for you to be successful, then I mean, then what are you doing? It's like applying what you're learning. And so that's how I came to do this second book. And I didn't want to just jump to a level where people uh, could just immediately jump to. I wanted to give them a foundation. So I consider this book like the foundation. So if you, because that's how you have to build a house. That's how you have to build your leadership. You must have a solid foundation. So these habits, these 5 No Excuses habits, are the foundations to help you be that type of leader that you need in any business, any entrepreneur, any, if you're in a Fortune 500 company, if you work in a school, if you're a basketball coach, a soccer coach, any type of coach. I mean, if you're a professional coach, these are the habits that you must have.
And what are some of those habits?
Oh, absolutely. So the first habit is you have to feed your brain. You have to feed your brain. You know, you are what you eat. I'm sure people have heard that before, and I tell it people all the time. You are what you eat. So if you constantly feed your mind with negativity, then guess what? You're going to be a negative person. Everything about you will be negative. The way you talk, the way you move, the way you interact with others is going to be negative. But if you're feeding yourself with positivity, if you're feeding yourself with love, if you're feeding yourself with joy, if you're feeding yourself with things that are are just lovable about you, then that's how you'll be with others. And you know this, and any of you that's listening to this in any type of role, relationships matter, right? And you have to have positive relationships with people if you want them to buy your product or buy your services or invite you to be on their podcast, or you know, whatever the case may be. So number one is you have to feed yourself. And here's the thing, uh, you can read, you know, and that's the old way of doing things, but people still read. It's still a good way to feed your brain. But with the advancement of technology, as I mentioned earlier, you can listen to YouTube videos, you can listen to podcasts, TEDx talks. Um, there's so many ways to consume information. But here's the thing, you can't just consume information, because that's just cramming information. You have to actually go out and apply the information that you're learning. So that's habit number one. Habit number two is uplift and inspire. You know, as a leader, here's the thing, we're already at that point where you're considered a leader, but now are you helping others to grow, to become leaders? Because that, to me, that's really what your role is as a leader, is to help bring others up and bring the leadership out of them. So you definitely have to uplift and inspire your team, because one thing I know is I can't do everything by myself, right? Everybody who is successful, no matter, you can choose somebody out the top of your head, they have a team of people that they are uplifting and inspiring, and those people are doing the same thing to that person as the leader. So that's habit number two. Habit number three is always step back and remember the big picture. I think a lot of times when people fall, especially in leadership, is their eyes get off the prize. They take their eyes off of the big picture. But if you always remember what the big picture, what is your ultimate goal, right? If your ultimate goal is to get a sale, if your ultimate goal is to sell your services, you have to keep your eyes on the big picture. When at any time your eyes get off of that big picture, that's when things start to unravel and unfold, and it goes haywire, right? And then the fourth one is to remember your influence. As leaders, you have a great amount of influence just by being a leader. And here's the thing, your influence can be negative or it could be positive. So just remembering the type of influence that you're bringing on a daily. And so I ask this question anytime I do a training is, what type of energy are you bringing into the office today?
Mhm.
That's the type of influence, because here's the thing, that influence, your the way you come into the office, it's like a magnet. So if you come in and you're down and out and you're just lazy and you're not in a good mood, then that's what you're going to receive in return. There's going to be people that's going to be standoffish. No, today is not a good day. Don't talk to him. He's not in a good mood. And that doesn't help anybody, right? But if your influence, if your body language, if your energy is uplifting, if it's positive, if it's, just so contagious to the point where people want to run through a wall and do whatever it is you're asking them to do, that's the type of influence you want to have. And then the last one, and it goes back to what I was talking about from the first book, is you have to reflect daily. What can you do to be better tomorrow than you was today? That's a question that I ask myself every day. What can I do to be better today than I was yesterday? And if you reflect, so I like to reflect twice a day, in the morning on my way into the office and at the night when on my way home, because I like to cleanse my mind. Because if when I get home, I need to, whatever, if there's anything that happened throughout the day, I like to cleanse my mind so when I get home, I can give my family the best of me, because they deserve the best of me. And the same is true in the morning when I'm coming into the office, my staff, right? People that work with me, they deserve the best of me. So that's what I intend to give them.
Hmm. Well, that's great. That's great. Five. The second habit, uplifting, inspire. How does that look like? Like tactically, how would somebody go about doing that?
So actually, it really depends on exactly whatever your team needs at that moment. Because here's the thing, your team, somebody from your team may, let's say if their job is to get you more sales, and they're in a funk, like they've talked to 10 or 20 people and they're shooting 0 for 10 or 0 for 20. It is your job to, bring them to the side, maybe try a different strategy, go over a different strategy with them, help them to understand that, hey, listen, it's okay. It happens to the best of us, right? So what we need to do is get you out of this shooting slump. And so maybe that means you sitting down with them or taking that next call and helping them try to close the deal, or putting them with somebody somebody on the other side. They may be going 8 for 10 or shooting 16 for 20, and maybe you can get them to just pair up. It really depends on whatever it is that they need at that time in that moment. It's not a one size fits all. So you have to, that's why it goes back to just knowing your influence, knowing your team, and knowing exactly what is it that you need today from me, or what is it that you need this week? How can I better serve you? And then you as the leader giving them those tools that they need in their toolbox in order to be successful.
Yeah, there is this author that wrote that book, Grit. She was talking about that they gave an essay to students, and half the class got an essay and say, "Hey," and you probably heard this story where they say, "Hey, return them with corrections or whatever." But then the second half, they gave them a sticky note that said, "Hey, I'm giving you these corrections because I expect so much out of you, and I know that you can write so well." And then
Right.
I think it was like 30% of the students that were just given plain the regular paper to correct
Hmm.
returned it, and like 65% of the students that got the little sticky notes with the expectations. So it's like almost like uplifting them, but then also you have to like back it up, like you were saying, right? Like you have to
Right.
give them on relentless like
Yes.
support for them to continuous. It's not a one thing, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And as an
Because
educator,
here's the thing: if you and this is actually something I wrote in my third book, is if the only tool that you have in your toolbox is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail to you.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how are you relating that to,
So you have to have more than one tool in your toolbox.
yeah,
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 because sometimes it doesn't require a hammer.
yeah,
Sometimes you might need a screwdriver, right? Or a wrench or some other type of tool. So you have to have more things. And normally, you as the leader, you have all of these resources, but your team may not have all of them. So how are you going to help them? How are you going to share your tools with them so that they too can be as successful?
yeah, yeah. And I think as leaders sometimes we think that people should know everything that we know, or we forget how much we've had to do and go
Right.
through, and so it just should be normal for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think the same for teenagers. When we're working with kids or youth, they have such a good front, because
Yeah.
they're young and I can do anything. And sometimes we forget how much they don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
how much
That is
support they
true.
need. And so tell us about your third book.
So my third book is actually called Thriving After High School. And it's a letter, it's actually a letter that I'm writing to my 18-year-old self about life and relationships. And in this book, I just talk about, what I've learned since pretty much since I've graduated high school, which was back in the 90s. So, and I've learned so much that was not taught in school. And here's the thing: I start off just like in Outlier Leadership with telling you that there is more to learn. Because here's the thing: once you graduate high school, the first thing on your mind is, finally, I've done it, I've made it. But really, I mean, you have it. There's so much that is not being taught in school that you're going to have to learn. And so I wanted to let that be the first thought in your mind. Soon as you graduate, is there so much more to learn? And here's the thing: I wish, and everyone I talk to, I have not met one person yet, and I know a lot of people, but I have not met one person that has told me, oh, I've learned everything I needed to know from kindergarten to 12th grade. I've never met one person that said that to me. Um, and so everyone, 100% of the people who I talk to, who I work with, agree that there's so much more to learn after you graduate from high school. And then I just give other different um, points that you'll need to know, such as some investing, how to invest, and maybe why you should invest, how to serve others. I tell people how, everything you do begins with you. I talk about your mindset being everything. I talk about how to valuing yourself, respecting yourself, how to value others. Don't compare yourself to others. A lot of times people, you're so caught up in comparing yourself that you lose yourself. Just because, Johnny brought a new house does not mean you need to now go out and buy yourself a new and bigger house. Just because, your friend down the street, Lindsay, brought a brand new car does not mean you need to next weekend go out, look for it, and buy yourself a brand new car. So I just try to give just the life lessons that I've learned throughout, since I've graduated from high school, just to help give them some type of knowledge to know that there's more that you're going to need to know and more that you're going to need to do once you graduate high school. And the reason I called it Thriving After High School is, so for me, like I said, growing up the youngest of seven, I mean, my mother was on welfare, single parent home. And my mother, she grew up on a farm. And there was days where she didn't even go to school because she had to stay, pick cotton, milk cows, and do all of those things because they had a dairy farm as well as other crops on the farm. And her dad, he didn't go to school at all. So, he didn't value education. And so, of course, his children, that was not a priority for them. But for me, it was a priority because, I didn't want to have that type of livelihood. I wanted to learn, I wanted to be able to grow. And I'm glad that my mother, she was not like, her dad, in a sense, you know, school was not a priority. So I thank her for that. And so just learning everything that I've learned, I just wanted to put something together because I was in survival mode, you know, and I got tired of being in survival mode. And anytime you're caught in surviving mode, then you really don't have the mindset to thrive because you're constantly trying to survive. And so that's why on the cover, you notice like I have surviving crossed out because it's time to stop surviving and now it's time to start thriving. And in order for you to thrive, I just gave you some of the things, like I said, that you'll need in order to thrive in this book, Thriving After High School.
That's so great because that's such a big theme of how I kind of help people or try to help people to understand that, the whole thing between struggling, uh, suffering, struggling, or thriving. And I don't know if you're familiar with this survey. You probably are with the Gallup. They did
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
150 countries, and only
Hmm.
7% of the countries were thriving in all five areas of life. So
Right.
financial, social,
Those are,
um, physical health,
yeah,
community health,
yeah,
and so in career health, those
right,
five things. And so it's like you just get to realize like, oh my goodness, like so much of the world is actually struggling
right.
and so what does the word thriving mean to you?
Definitely. Well, first of all, it's like overcoming. So when you
Right.
overcome and then you're pushing forward. So not only overcoming, but now you're pushing forward. Because if all you do is overcome, then you're stuck. You're still stuck in a place. But now when you push forward, you're still climbing higher and higher and higher and higher. So to me, that's what I mean when I'm saying uh, instead of surviving, thriving, overcoming and pushing forward.
Huh. Yeah, that's so cool. The first time that I read the definition of thriving, when he says that it means there is multiple ones, but the one that said seizing the opportunity,
Mhm.
of that moment, whatever is happening, crap, just everything goes to craps, and there is nothing else you can do. It is the darkest moment of your life, and in that moment you decide, you know what, I'm gonna get up one more time. I'm gonna take this and seize this opportunity. There's an opportunity
Yes.
within this. If I'm not dead, that means that there is something that I can still go forward. How can I take this on and move forward, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and for I think for our youth right now, especially for the minority youth, and not even the minority youth, I think the youth that doesn't have guidance. So that could be black, white, yellow,
Right.
orange. It doesn't matter. Just certain one. Some of those groups have more of less of that guidance than others.
Right.
Whatever by whatever circumstances history has thrown at us, and I think, do you think that that's kind of not taught? Like I remember the moment when I was reading this study from Gallup like eight
Yeah.
years ago, and I was like, so is thriving a decision? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. 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 No, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And I think it's definitely something that can be learned. Um, but here's it goes back to what I one of the things that I preach on is mindset being everything. It's a mindset.
yeah.
Really, when you look at it, it's a mindset because um, some people are okay with surviving. Like for a good example, that I would use is people who are in survival mode are people who live paycheck to paycheck.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're but for some people, think about it. For some people, that works for them.
Hmm.
They're man, I get paid on the first and the 15th. I know on the first, when I get this amount, I can pay these bills and do this and do that. And then 2 weeks later, I'm gonna get paid again, and then I'll pay these bills and I can do this and to do that. And then I just gotta wait again until the first. That's survival mode. People who are thriving, they are not living paycheck to paycheck, um, because they have whatever you want to call it. If it's a safety net, I mean, they have savings. They are investing, so they don't necessarily rely on the living paycheck to paycheck. But it goes back to being a mindset, because some people, like I said, if you're okay in that state of mind and you don't see anything wrong with being in that state of mind, then guess what? You're going to stay in that state of mind because you don't see a problem with it. But when at some point when you get tired, like, man, every time I get paid, I got to pay Peter, I got to pay Paul, I got to pay this, I got to pay that, and I never have anything left to do what I really want to do, or travel, and all of these things that you could be doing. When people get out of that mindset, then they realize I have to do something different, and doing something different means thriving.
Yeah, taking that opportunity and moving forward somehow. When was the moment that you were like, I'm tired of just surviving?
Yeah.
Was there multiple of them, or what was one of
Yeah,
the ones that kind of hit to mind?
it was definitely multiple moments, but for me, I'm gonna say it was probably about 10 years ago. Actually, 10 years ago, when I got fed up. I was just fed up, and that's when I actually started to do things to get myself out of living paycheck to paycheck. Um, and that involved, going back to school to get my doctorate. That involved, what I realized I was, when I was living in Tampa, Florida. And no offense to Tampa, I love Tampa, Florida. Okay, so if you listening and you from
I
Tampa,
used to
I
live in
love
Tampa.
Tampa.
Yeah.
Okay, but I realized, what, uh, this is not the place for me to really get to the level that I want to be at. So I decided to pick my family up and move in 2013, and we moved to Houston, Texas. And since I've been in Houston, Texas, I have been thriving nonstop, and I don't want it to stop. So it's just a matter of really, once you change your mindset and then doing what you need to do. That's the thing. You have to do what you need to do that's better for you or for your family. I mean, whoever it is, because if you're not just doing it for yourself, if you have a family, then you're doing it for them as well. So so for me, that's what it was. And I will never, go back. I would never go backwards.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that mindset is so important that it's like, hey, no matter what's happened, I'm gonna decide. And I've seen people in the hospital, they're in the deathbed and they're still making the best out of
Right.
the last couple hours they got
Yeah.
here in this,
Yeah.
and they
Absolutely.
they they design it and they go through it like champs,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And here's the thing, even with mindset, because, like, for one, I believe people actually live in three different sets of mindsets: the past, the present, or the future.
Yeah.
And I can always, um, dwell in the past, but if I dwell in the past, or even if I dwell in the future, then I can never grow to the, I mean, if I dwell in the present, I can never grow to the future. But I always tell people this, because people like to say, don't look back. But I disagree with that. You have to look back to know where you came from so you don't make those same mistakes again and don't put yourself in that same position again. So I always look back from where I came from to where I am now and make sure that I don't follow that same pattern that I did in the past.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was actually reading an interview with Jeff Bezos, and he was saying that about 80% of his day is spent in the future. And that
Absolutely.
if he's spending time on the present or in the past, that means things have gone wrong. And
That's right.
the mechanisms are not working. Something is going off. He's having to put a fire,
Right.
Otherwise, there is creation. And I think when you look at neuroscience, when we're doing this creation, when we're creating, it gives us so much dopamine, so many chemicals that give us even more get up and go. It's like drinking a cup of coffee without having to drink in the cup of coffee. You're just charged up. And,
Right.
and, and I know you're a speaker. And how is that? I've done a couple of events, and how does that feel for you? Like being on a stage and sharing, and how does that experience?
Man, it's amazing. It's amazing because here's the thing. I only, and this is what I tell myself. So I only speak to bring positivity, light, inspiration to others. And so knowing that I am giving back to the world something great, something that's inside of me, something that they need to hear, that could potentially change their lives. I mean, that gives me such great honor to even have that opportunity. And actually tomorrow I have another opportunity. I'll be a speaker at it's the LRL. It's a virtual global youth leadership conference, and so I get the chance to inspire some young people, and I'm just so excited to have that opportunity, because anytime I speak, somebody comes back and tells me, like, dude, I'm so glad I was here at this moment to hear you and hear that message, and it did so much for me. And and if I can change one person, and then if that one person can share that message and it touches somebody else, then I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Oh, that's so awesome. Is this the one that they used to have in San Diego and they had to close
No,
down?
no, no. So this is actually the first. This is the first conference that they're doing, and so I'm blessed to be a part of,
Yeah.
the first one. And originally, of course, before COVID, it was supposed to be a live event, but it's virtual, and so that's still cool.
Yeah, exactly. You you just move with it and go with the flow with the
Right.
current times of what's going on. And so what's next for you? What are you working on next?
Well, just continuing to grow the business, um, looking for definitely some other speaking opportunities. Right now, in contact with a couple of different event planners for the upcoming spring semester, as well as just looking to start booking my calendar for next year. I do have one event that was actually postponed. It was actually supposed to be this no next week. It was going to be next week, and it's a culture on a conference on culture that will be taking place in Orlando, Florida, at the Gaylord Resort. So it got postponed to next year during the month of October. So that's already on my calendar, and the holidays are coming up. So just looking forward to spending some time with the family. And just enjoying each other, and so that's what's next.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Um, and you know, one of the things that you mentioned that is just coming up right now is in your last book that I liked was the framework, having a
Yeah.
blueprint, having a blueprint.
Yes.
Uh, Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
So, man, a blueprint is so important. A blueprint is like the vehicle that gets you from point A to point B, or where you are to where you want to be. So here's an example. Let's say, for example, you go to the doctor and you've had a runny nose, you've been coughing, right? And you say, "Hey, doc, um, I think I have the flu." And of course, the doctor is going to examine you and maybe run some tests. And then the doctor is going to actually give you the real diagnosis. And he might say, "Hey, Andres, you don't have the flu. You actually have COVID-19, right?" And then, of course, what you want him to do is, well, I mean, is there something I can take? Is there something I can do? And hopefully he can prescribe you a prescription. And if by taking this prescription, hopefully if you get healed, then you're like, perfect. I feel so much better. I'm good. And that's the blueprint. And a lot of times people don't have the blueprint. They don't know what can they do from the state that they are in now to where they want to be. They don't know the true diagnosis. They don't know the true prescription to take to get them cured so that they can get to exactly where they are. So I encourage everybody, you have to have a blueprint. And it goes back to whatever example you want to use. If you are tired of surviving, you need a blueprint to help you start thriving. If you're tired of living paycheck to paycheck, you need a blueprint to help you get from that state of mind of living paycheck to paycheck. If you are tired of your job, maybe you're just working because you have to pay bills, you have to put food on the table, but you hate that place. You need a blueprint to get out of that situation and go to either a job that you love or become an entrepreneur doing something to give back to the world, something that you're passionate about and that others will love. You need a blueprint.
Huh, that's so cool. And so how does that look like for people? Where can people get these blueprints?
Well, so I believe the blueprint is already inside of you. It's already inside of you. And if you think there's no way, I don't have a blueprint inside of me. Here's the thing. You can look at other people who have a blueprint. You can all remember, it goes back to there's so much more to learn. Feed your brain, right? You can learn this from others. So find someone in your niche. Let's say, if you maybe want to host podcasts, hey, Andres is a good person for you to learn from, right? If you want to sell insurance, find the person in your area that's doing the best selling insurance. If you want to be an educator, find an educator and learn from that person. Learn what steps did you take to get where you are now. But here's the thing, and this is vital. Don't just hear what this person is saying. Don't just read what they are saying. You need to apply it. You need to apply it. See, a lot of people, they get this information and then they they stop. Like, okay, I I mean, I don't have $500 to go back and take this class, or I don't have this money to start my own business, or I don't, and then you just give up. So all you've done is cram information in your head and you haven't done anything to move forward. You have to apply the things that you are learning. That's only way, the only way that you'll be able to have your blueprint, have whatever that blueprint is for you, because it's different for everybody, and also to help you thrive during these times.
Hmm. Awesome stuff. All right, Dr. Blazer, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And your books, I can't wait until digging into the first two. So I'll be doing that, and so I really appreciate it, and really looking forward to seeing where you're taking things next. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me. It has been an honor to be on your podcast, and I pray and hope that everything you do turns to gold.
Thank you so much. It's been great getting to talk to you.
You as well.
All right.